Welcome to Latinx Can, a podcast showcasing Latinx professionals who turn their dreams into realities. I'm your host, la doctora Yanire Flores Delgado, and today I'm here with Dr. Wilmarie Marrero Ortiz, a Puerto Rican scientist whose relentless pursuit of her passion helped her beat the odds. And she's here to tell you, sí se puede, my friend, sí se puede. This is the second part of a two-part episode in which Dr. Wilmarie shares with us her experience preparing to apply for fellowships that gave her a financial freedom that any grad student would dream of, and which took her to represent her beloved island of Puerto Rico in the United States at the Paris Climate Change Conference. So, Wilmarie, you graduated from the University of Puerto Rico, and then it was time for you to decide where to go to grad school. So tell us a little bit about the strategy that you employed to apply and to then eventually get accepted into a university in the continental U.S.
From those research programs, they encourage you and basically teach you how to apply to different schools. So they were really into that mentorship aspect. Then also, as a part of the MARC program, they always take us to a conference called ABRACAMS. It's the annual biomedical research conference for minority students.
Okay.
And also there's another conference about that time that is called SACNAS, that is the Society for the Advancement of Hispanic, Chicanos, and Native Americans in Science.
Okay.
And something that I really took advantage from those conferences is that when you are kind of ready to apply for grad school, they offer those type of application fee waiver.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to apply to probably 7 or 8 different universities. Because all for free.
Wow.
And then getting that opportunity, because I met a lot of people that were not able to go to those conferences, that they say, I only applied to 1 or 2 universities.
Wow.
Because I didn't have the money to pay for the GRE, to pay for the application and the time to put those applications. One of the things particular to me was that my GPA was lower than 3.5. So it was not like an 8 student, basically. So for me, it was easy for them to filter myself. So I wanted to make sure that all my experience in terms of research, which is technically one of the most important things for grad school itself, and basically I needed to apply as much as I can, because I was an easy target for filtering because of my GPA, because of my GRE score, etc. And sometimes you don't know I didn't know exactly how the universities evaluate that. If they will evaluate everybody from an holistic aspect, or they will start filtering and then doing the holistic aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it probably is still a mystery. I appreciate you telling us how, on paper, you perhaps were not the perfect candidate to be accepted into grad school. And I can tell you, for example, that I probably wasn't either. I did have a very high GPA. I think it was 3.7 or something. So a little higher than 3.5. But I had almost no research experience. I only started doing research on my junior year, and I did terrible in the GREs. I'm going to tell you, I did better in the English part than the math part. And so I can tell you it was a terrible, terrible score. And part of it is because, I didn't know how to take this exam. So I did terrible, and I only applied to 4 schools because that's what I could afford and really what I knew. I didn't really know so much about the process. And it was one of the things is that I went to undergraduate at the University of Florida, and I was doing research at the University of Florida, and I almost didn't get accepted to the University of Florida because my GRE was so bad, you know? And so I don't know. I really don't know how they filter or how they do their selections. But I think you and I are proof that standardized tests are not what measures the commitment and the ability of a person to get through a PhD program. And so that probably needs to get reevaluated.
Yeah, actually, a lot of schools start reevaluating that. I know, based on my academic exposure from Twitter, a lot of schools does not require GRE for grad school, and it's more not necessary for school; it's program dependent. But now with the COVID, there's a big movement for not requiring those standardized tests as a admission process.
It took a pandemic to realize that standardized tests are not what you need to be successful in life, right? Okay, so you applied to about 8 schools, all for free, which is amazing. How do you decide to go to Texas A&M University?
I got accepted from those 8. I got accepted only on 3. Okay. And I was able to only visit 2 of them. Then from those 3, I decided choosing Texas A&M for 3 factors. One was because I knew the department because I was exposed to it when I was in the summer research. Yeah. So it was not completely like a new environment. Yeah. And I knew also another grad students that were coming from the same background as me. Then the other was the money that they gave, the affordability, because I needed to make sure that the cost of living and the stipend that they were providing, that it was enough for me to at least take care of myself. And then the third factor was technically like the weather, because coming from a tropical island, like going to Colorado for during those winters, it was like a full new closet. Like I needed extra money just to adapt myself.
You know, I did the same thing when I applied to grad school. I went to my then undergraduate advisor, Dr. Miller, and I asked him, you know, I'm going to apply for grad school. I wonder what places you recommend. And he goes and he says, okay, for polymer chemistry, the University of Minnesota is really good. And I was like, oh, but it's too cold. You know, I cannot go there. And he's like, no. What you do is that, you know, you go to school before it starts snowing, and then you just stay there all the time. And that way you're going to be really good at doing research. And I was like, hell no. I want to go to a tropical place.
Yeah, and that's actually another like personal aspect in the decision. Like I know friends that they are from California, that they wanted like their school to be only in California because it was more accessible for them visiting their family or even their doctors. Like, so those are kind of like personal aspects that you need to consider and not be afraid to put that in your grid for the decision and categorize, because at the end it will be a long process, and you need to make sure that you are happy and comfortable to then focus on the research. Because if you will be uncomfortable and having all those different distractions, it can be really difficult. I mean, grad school is not easy, but you don't deserve to be also miserable.
And so, Wilmarie, you mentioned that one of the reasons was because of the finances and the money that they offered you. Can you explain a little bit about the finances? How you mean the school paid you while you were in grad school?
Yeah, during grad school, basically for the majority of the STEM field, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that for STEM fields, like the university should pay you, and they also will pay your tuition and the fees. Because basically you need to focus on doing your research. You are not also studying, taking classes, but you are also working, and you deserve to be paying for that work. So knowing also like the different cost of living from the cities, like sometimes a stipend of $2,000 in Texas will be good, but it's not good enough for New York. So you need to make that balance, and then not just being overshadowed for the amount of money that you will have in 1 month, for example. Also, one of the things that from Texas A&M they offer was the diversity fellowship upon my acceptance. So that was a huge advantage because the traditional first year student in the chemistry department at Texas A&M, normally the first year they need to teach 3 sections for labs. And then with this fellowship, I was able to only be able to teach 1 section for the lab. So then I was able to take that other time to focus on study, which for me at the beginning was really difficult because, like I say initially, all my classes were in Spanish. And then start taking classes in English was a little bit more difficult at the time of taking notes. Like, my books were in English, but then I was reading at my own pace. And if I didn't understand something, I can go and get a translator or ask to somebody. But in the class setup, it's really different. And then I remember that the quantum chemistry class was the easier one because everything was math. So I didn't understand. I remember one day, like, I didn't understand any of the relations that you did, but I understand all the math and all the derivation. So I remember I went to the office of Dr. Wheeler, like, okay, now explain me the science behind all this math.
I relate so well because I did my undergrad in the US and I already had 2 years of experience ahead of me of learning in English because I had gone to an international school in Eswatini, the Kingdom of Eswatini. And this is in Southern Africa, and it's a little landlocked country that is surrounded by Mozambique on one side and South Africa on the other. And I remember one of the subjects I took there was chemistry because I liked chemistry. And it was incredibly difficult. I didn't know what I was doing for like 4 months. But I was in class one day and I remember that the next week we were going to do an experiment and we needed to get shells. And I was like, okay, shells. I need to get shells. That's what I got in my mind. And so the days after that, I went online and I was like, shells. What are shells? I don't know what that is. So I start Googling stuff and I see seashells. And I was like, seashells? But like, where am I going to get seashells if I'm in like the top of a mountain in a landlocked country? We are not close to the sea. I'm not. So I did. And I was ashamed of asking. So I was just Googling and trying to figure it out. And I went on walks to see if I could find something. And, the next week I came to class and I was defeated because I had no shells. And then all I see around, and they had already set up the experiments, and they had eggshells.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, that would have been so much easier. Now it makes sense. So, I can relate. I couldn't even tell shells apart. So I can imagine how hard it was to study quantum physics and quantum mechanics in a completely new language.
Yeah, it was really challenging. So basically, that diversity fellowship, that what it's called, basically gave me more time to study and learn this new setting of research background while only teaching like 1 lab. Then my graduate advisor during the first semester, he received a convocatory from university program sponsored by NSF called Bridge to the Doctorate program from the LSM, which is the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. He came to my office and gave me the paperwork like, you should apply. And I applied, I got the interview, and they basically by the end of December, they told me that I was awarded. So that was a huge relief in one sense because the diversity fellowship asks you for maintain a 3.5 GPA in order to keep the fellowship. So that means with only 2 classes in grad school, you can only have 1 B and 1 A. Yeah. And I was struggling to get at least 1 A. So I was like, I would have 2 B or even 1 C, depending on how I'm going with this other class. Yeah. And then if with those grades, if I could not take care of with 1 lab section. Imagine then not getting that fellowship the second semester and then teaching 3 sections.
Yeah.
So with that fellowship, then basically they were saying this, that I was prohibited to teach. That I was only need to really focus. And actually it was about $200 more than what I was receiving the first semester.
Wow, yeah. And so one of the big benefits of this fellowship is, of course, the financial support. But what other tools did they provide you, or what other benefits did you get from being in the selected group of students who were awarded the fellowship?
So my initial benefit indirectly was meeting other people, like sharing and meeting people across different cultures, different backgrounds, and then from different areas of research. And that basically I start kind of like getting some aspect of like all the different areas that the university have, like professor opportunities.
It was a great way for you to be exposed to something different and to get a different perspective.
Yes, and then every 2 weeks, they always have some seminars on Thursday related to either mentoring, more scholarship or resources, like how to do like time management, how to do finances during grad school. I didn't know how to do it. And a lot of like opportunities within the university and external opportunities. And I really like having those seminars because sometimes I feel that even from my own department, they were not going into that depth. And also I was always afraid asking questions. If it was something within my department, different to if it was in the setup with these people that are more like me.
And so one of the opportunities that you got there, we know it's an opportunity, but maybe for you it felt like a little bit of a punishment, was to apply for the NSF fellowship. Tell us a little bit about what the NSF fellowship is, what it means, and how you got prepared for that.
So the NSF fellowship is the GRFP, the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. It's a super competitive research fellowship. They only accept about 10% or 15%.
And how many people apply?
Well, they normally accept 2,000 people per year.
Okay, wow.
So yeah, the cap is 2,000 awardees. And it's only about 10% the acceptance rate.
Wow.
So from all that, I decided to I'm going to apply this, but I wanted to prepare a really good essay and a really good package that if they reject me because of my credential, because I didn't have GPA, because my proposal was bad, because I didn't have broader impact. Not because I didn't know how to compile a package. You need to make sure to make it as a story. Because that was one of my fears. I have so many research opportunities, but I didn't want to put this as a list of accomplishment. Because if it was just putting a list of accomplishment, then they would just only require you for your CV, not for essays. So I needed to put an essay kind of like telling a story and how to we're connecting all the dots.
And that's so important, that what you're sharing, because I had never thought about it that way. You know, I've always seen an essay just like a requisite of something that you have to do. I mean, and I never felt that I could get personal in those essays and to actually show, you know, my real personality. And it's interesting to see your perspective and understand that perhaps what they're trying to do is to get to know you as a person and to get to know a little bit more besides the grades and the things that they can see in different papers. So that's a very interesting perspective.
Then after I get my 2 pages for each essay, then I start sending it to a lot of people. Like I feel that I got over 10 reviewers to write my essay. Since English was not kind of my first language, I was still not comfortable like writing this type of things in English completely. So I wanted like second eyes and everything. And the same, like if I'm going to be rejected, it's because of my credential, not necessarily because I forgot to put a comma
Asking for feedback is so important because it helps you understand what your weaknesses are and how you can address them, because you've mentioned a couple of times now that you didn't want to be sort of penalized for not speaking English, which is already a huge challenge to overcome. And especially when you take into account that the people who you're competing against are probably native English speakers, right? So that was very important to you. And I know from my own experience that asking for feedback can be difficult. Or, for somebody to ask for feedback, they have to have courage to do it. Have you found any tips that have made it easier for you to ask for feedback?
You want the feedback to be honest, and
Yes.
sometimes if you don't create that relation with that other person, they might be afraid
Yeah.
of being honest to giving the feedback. So sometimes you need to start building a little bit more of like the relation so that they can feel safe, that
Yeah.
you will take into consideration their feedback, and that you won't get any retaliation against them if they mention to you something good or bad,
Yeah.
right? Because having always a positive feedback is not helpful, the same that
Yeah.
it's not always helpful always having a negative feedback. Needs
Yeah.
to be some kind of honest, and then also having the different people from different backgrounds, that they basically can note or highlight particular aspect from your story or from your personality for the feedback.
Yeah. I think that's very important what you're saying about building a relationship. And one of the things that I can add, I was actually listening to a podcast the other day, and they were actually talking about how to ask for feedback. And the podcast is called Coaching for Leaders, and the episode is episode 442, and it's called How to Be More Self Aware with Tasha Urich. And what Tasha was saying is that you really need to know whom you're going to ask for feedback, because like you said, you want the feedback to be honest, and you to do that you have to build a relationship. So what she says is that in order to get honest feedback, you have to believe that the person has your best interest at hand, and that the person is also willing to tell you the truth no matter what. So that's one thing that our listeners can take into account when they start looking for people that they can solicit feedback from. And the other thing that she mentioned is that when you ask for feedback, you should try to make it as specific as possible, because that way you are really directing the process and you're helping that person who's giving you feedback to do it a lot more easily. Because, there's a difference between, oh, do you have any feedback for me today? And that can open the door for them to, I don't know, tell you about how you're dressed instead of actually telling you about your performance. So when you actually say, Wilmarie, I would like to get feedback from you regarding the interview that we did today. What do you think? That is very different, and it allows that person to narrow the scope of the feedback, and to also be more focused and have or be in a better position for them to give you something that you can act upon to improve on your weakness, because that is the point of asking for feedback. If you don't ever ask, you're never going to realize what areas you can improve. And if you don't know what you can improve, then you're never going to be successful. Okay. And so feedback definitely helped you with the NSF fellowship. So how did you find out that you became an NSF fellow?
I applied my second year, so it was basically my last chance, my first and last chance. Then I remember the day before, I was doing something in the lab and everything went wrong. So I was actually like really frustrated at night, and I fall asleep with everything on, TV, lights, and everything. Then about 2 a.m., I decide to go back to bed, and then I decide as a millennial check my cell phone before going to bed again. And then I saw the email from the NSF, and when I opened, says congratulations, and I was like, wait, it's April 1st. This is not a joke, right? And then I kind of open it, and then I decide to then turn on again my computer, go into the list of awardees if it was true or not. And it was true. Then I was so happy, and I was feeling that this was like surreal. I couldn't believe it. And
Wow. Yeah.
I called my family, my brother, my friends, and then I went to the lab like super early that day because I was already awake. So I was really happy that day. And yeah, I couldn't believe it. And then basically they always give you kind of like reading evaluation, basically the reviewers.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the first sentence from one of the reviewer was, this is an application from a very experienced research with a long list of presentation and 2 reviews under her belt.
Yeah.
So basically I wanted to put those kind of like, I have research experience.
Yeah.
And then the other was, at an early point in her study, she identified this area of research as an important to her and has done everything possible to gain experience and knowledge to pursue her goal. Although her academic record is a little under par, I think her drive and focus compensate to some extent. So I was kind of like, okay, my essays were clear enough that my intention with every paragraph were delivered and they were captured by the reviewers. Then that means that even this process was so long and so exhausted, it was worth it, because that was three years more of funding, which even more money than what I was receiving from the other 2 fellowships.
Yeah.
And then basically this fellowship is for you. It's not for the university. So it's at some point you wanted to change university, you can take away the fellowship with you.
So let's take a moment to understand really the impact of that achievement from you. You know, you were this person who had already identified her shortcomings and made sure that her message was so clear that the reviewers could see that in your application. And talk about, you know, you thinking that your language barrier was a challenge for you to get this fellowship, right? It's a person who only started really fully functioning 100% in English a couple of years prior to that application, and you achieved the ability to convey your message so clearly that, to be honest, many English speakers cannot do. And that's amazing. And then on top of that, you were, you know, in the 10% of your class out of about 20,000 people who, you know, you might not have the best academic pedigree if you compare it to an Ivy League school or even just the grades, but it's not about that. That doesn't determine your success. It really is about the effort and the work that you put in to achieve your goals.
Absolutely. And that's something that I always mention. Like, it was not only like my dedication, but also like taking that seriously and ask for feedback. Like, I mean, I'm willing to put all my efforts doing this, but I really need your feedback, the different perspective. Be prepared to also like follow the instruction. Like, I think that's one of my top 10 kind of like suggestion to apply for this fellowship is basically like follow the instruction, use their language. Basically, I prepare as many drafts as possible.
How did the university react when they heard that you had obtained the NSF fellowship? This is an outstanding achievement, and I'm sure that any university would be proud to have an NSF fellow among the ranks.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of people that congratulate me, that they were like super happy that I got it, but I also have some like drawbacks. I have some faculties that they told me basically in my face that I got a fellowship because I was Hispanic woman.
Wow.
And on the moment, I was like, well, I know that they wanted to increase the diversity, so I guess I was part of it. But what I didn't realize at that moment was the microaggression that basically they were diminishing my credentials.
Yeah.
Like, then just, it was kind of like this affirmative action that you're only good because you are the diversity, not necessarily because of your performance.
Oh my gosh.
And basically at that point, I'm glad that I didn't took it like that because I didn't know how would it be my reaction. But then that night I started thinking about it with my overthinking aspect. I was like, well, this was actually not correct.
Yeah. What an unfortunate experience to have, but also the nerve of that faculty member to tell you that you only got it because you were Hispanic or Hispanic woman, and knowing all the effort that you already had. And, you could consider just even the mere fact that it's not your first language that you're using to put a packet together, and they're not even looking at you or anything like that. So it just speaks again of the incredible value that immigrants, in this case, you're not an immigrant because you belong to the United States, right? For one way or another, you're part of this, you're a citizen. But it just speaks of the value that we bring as a community to this country, and the extra work and dedication that we're putting in and that we're willing to put in just to achieve our dreams.
Exactly. I mean, it's just a matter of like dedication that is not to diminish anyone, but just the mere fact that we were able to get to be competitive at the same level academically can sometimes erase all the obstacles that were in that journey for us, the immigrant, because most of the time, I assure you that it's not a straight line. That could be for other native people.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. That really puts a stain in that memorable experience. But I'm glad that overall it was an experience that you were able to enjoy, and that, you always have, and it always distinguish you as the great achiever that you are.
Yeah, and I actually took that fellowship later on with a great pride and was able to allow me to focus on other things rather than my own research during my grad school years. For example, based on the fellowship, as a part of my research, I was 3 months in China doing research. Wow. Yeah. So just not having that pressure from the advisors that who will pay her. Also spending time in more like a student organization, like the SACNA chapter, the Graduate and Professional Student Council, the Women in Science and Engineering group from the university. Yeah. And then also like being part of other topics, even national and international. I start getting this passion for like the science policy aspect. Yeah. So I start applying to a lot of programs for science policy that either I can afford it because of my fellowship or even the programs paid by their own. And then if my advisor will ask anything, will be like, well, it's part of my professional development. As long as I'm doing the research and deliver to you, like, for better or worse, like, you are not paying to me.
Yeah. It gives you a freedom or an independence that you can't really get unless your advisor is really supportive of yourself, like mine. Mine was very supportive, or you have the financial means to do it.
Exactly. And then I took advantage of that opportunity from the fellowship with great pride. And then also basically every opportunity that I was able, like there was something that caught my attention, I will go to that meeting. I will try to apply or even start in the conference and start getting networking. Kind of like from these 3 months that I was working in China, I remember that gave me kind of like an opportunity to like meet other cultures, meet other people, getting exposed to like that winter, which remember I was in Texas. Yeah. So being like 3 months under 30 degrees Fahrenheit for me was not easy. And of course, as my first time in Asia, like I wanted to do to the Great Wall, like I wanted to go to Forbidden City. So I wanted to do the sightseeing, the outdoorsy that then I needed kind of like to prepare. And then I'm there. So I don't know when I'm going to be back here. So I remember that I saved a lot of money during that year because I don't know when this opportunity will come again.
Yeah. Who would have thought that, most people, when they go to grad school, they think that they have to pay to go to grad school or go to another professional school. They have to get in debt. And, if you study a STEM field, not only can you get paid, but maybe you even have the opportunity to explore the world while you're at it, right?
Yeah, and that was basically one of my indirect goals that I try to take advantage with it, because even the NSF fellowship, they have other programs called Grow, which is that they provide you additional funding if part of your research you need to do it international. That's basically something analog to this Fulbright. I have a friend that she got the NSF fellowship, but also the Fulbright, and she was like 2 years in Colombia.
That's amazing. And you definitely, if that was one of your hidden goals, you definitely achieve those because one of the most memorable experiences that I'm going to dare to say from your career so far is that you represented the United States at the Paris Climate Change Conference, COP21. And, I wonder, I know that was a moment of great pride for everybody who knows you. And I want to learn more about, how does a Puerto Rican scientist become the representative of the U.S. at such an important event?
That was actually an event that I saw the headline or the announcement in one of the American Chemical Society emails. As a member, you receive normally like weekly emails.
But
depends on your interest or the timing. Sometimes you never open. Then that day, I don't know why, I decided to apply, and I was like, oh, this is actually like from the American Chemical Society advocating for climate change. And then I was thinking like, well, based on my academic research or experience, I know that I can be competitive. But then I read the kind of like more the requirements, and then it was just an essay, but then they say, oh, you are financially responsible for it. And I was like, you know what? I have the NSF fellowship. I think that if I can save money on my own from now that it was about April, I think I can make it. So instead of limiting myself before applying, I decided, you know what? I'm going to apply. If they tell me yes, then I will think about it.
Yeah.
If they say no, then okay. So about a month after, I received the letter that I got it accepted, and I was like so excited. But at the same time, I remember that day I called my family and I started doing a budget. So then I don't know why I decided. I did all that on my own. I didn't talk with my advisor, my committee members, my professor, to anybody. I just do it on my own because that thing didn't require a letter of recommendation because it was also targeted to undergrads. One day I decided to mention it to my advisor, like, hey, I'm going to this conference. I got accepted from the American Chemical Society.
And not just the conference.
Exactly. From the United Nations. And then he was like super excited that he even told me like, you should ask the chemistry department for sponsor you or give you some money to pay for those expenses. And I was like, is that possible? Because then my advisors say, ask to as many people as you want, even mention it to the dean of the from the graduate schools and studies, and then whatever is left, then let me know and I can pay up to $1,000. And I was like, okay. So then I forward all the information to the chemistry department. They were able also to give me some, I think it was about $1,000 as well. And right now I don't recall exactly, but I remember that I got help from everybody, that I was able to basically not doing that budget that I was doing to pay for my trip.
Yeah.
So the housing and everything.
But that's an amazing story because, what I get from that is that you said it at the very beginning of the story. You didn't want the money to be a limitation. You didn't want the details of how you were going to make it happen be the limitation. Even before you applied, right? It's like you have to apply, because if you even try the opportunity, you are not even going to get it. You miss 100% of the opportunities you don't take. And so I think that's such a powerful message for anybody who is in this community where we have not built the generational wealth that makes it comfortable for people to go to school. And, education is so expensive in the United States, and it's your leg forward. It's that step that it's going to get you into a better financial situation, like it was for your parents back in Puerto Rico. But, if we think that that's the limitation and we cannot overcome that challenge, then we're not even going to be able to try to get there. And so it's so important. Don't give up just because you don't exactly know how you're going to make it work.
Yeah, and that's something that has been constant in all the story that I have shared, even from applying to doing the research, like applying to the summer programs, applying to grad school, like how many did I apply, like how many things that I felt that I was discouraged. And I ended up saying, like, well, let's apply, and then if I say no, it's fine, but you never know if somebody will say yes, and you then can take advantage.
Absolutely.
I was at a women's event a couple of years ago here in Houston, and they had this quotes from people on the screen. And I remember one of them, so I even took a picture of it, and it said, "Say yes, and you'll figure it out afterwards." And it was attributed by Tina Fey. But it's so important, right? Because, you get this opportunity. Don't limit yourself before you even have it in your hands. Knocking on the door is not getting inside the room. Then, tocar la puerta no es entrar. So just knock on the door.
Yeah, and then after that, after going to that conference, I even was my advisor who told me you should share this with the communication people from the university. I actually kind of like was a little bit shy to put that press release even in my own social media. Because I was like, maybe that's too much from me. And then somebody say like, no, you should send it to people. So then I sent the press release to the first meteorologist female in Puerto Rico who recommended my first undergraduate advisor. And I sent it to her, the press release. And she made the Spanish translate and put it in her Facebook page. And basically, like, everybody knew about it. And then that was in 2015. Then in 2016, when I started going to conference, people recognized me. Like, oh, you were the one going to Paris. And then even I remember in the AAAS meeting, I was in a bar, and then it was this person, which is like, she's the most amazing, like, in terms of science diplomacy from Puerto Rico. Her name is Frances Colon. She's from Puerto Rico, and she was in the State Department working for the Science and Technology Advisor after doing her PhD in neuroscience. And I've been always a fan of her since I knew her name and what she was doing in this theme of like science policy aspect.
Yeah.
And I was at the meeting at that bar, and somebody was introducing her. And when we were introducing ourselves to her, when I say my name, she's like, "Oh, I already know you. You were this person." I was like, "Wait, the fan moment should be from me to you, not to you from me." What's going on? But that was a great opportunity for even like networking outside my niche in science, but also like knowing more professionals from Puerto Rico or other Hispanic, like, hey, these opportunities are available for anyone.
Yeah, and talk about those graduate students that you met in DC, back when you were in high school. I'm sure they didn't quite know that introduction they made for you would eventually take you to Paris and to represent the United States. And I think it's amazing how, what you said, sharing the knowledge and making sure that people know about opportunities makes all the difference in the world.
Those type of connection, like sometimes you are really afraid, like that you're maybe like requesting too much.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's not a hurdle for them.
I think all you have to do is ask, and if they say no, then they just say no, right?
Exactly. And that's like you say at the beginning, that's a part of the representation.
Yeah.
You look like me, like you know the struggles, and you have been an example, or you have been taking an opportunity of somebody else who opened the door. So you need to be that open the door for the next generation. You grow while you are lifting others.
Absolutely. Wilmarie, thank you so much for joining us in this podcast today.
Thank you so much. And I'm really happy to be here and share my story.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. And if you want to put a face to the voices you just heard, you can follow us on Instagram at LatinxCan. If you have questions or feedback for us, you can email us at latinxcan@gmail.com. And if you like this episode, please leave a review. It is the quickest way to grow as a community. Once again, thank you for listening, and remember, unidos somos más.